Victor D'Amico was a pioneer in art education. He's also considered the father of modern museum education. He was born in 1904 in New York City and died April 1st, 1984 in Southampton, New York, not far from his beloved New York City. While he's considered the father of museum education, he's not the first museum educator. That occurred in the Great Columbian Exposition of 1893 in Chicago at the Museum of Science and Industry. During this event, a group of public school art teachers met, and the idea of using museums as educational tools tied directly to a classroom was born. It's often argued that Victor D'Amico's influence was more directly focused on art teachers. However, his classroom was firmly embedded in the Museum of Modern Art, thanks to Lillian Bliss, Mary Quinn Sullivan, and Amy Aldrich Rockefeller, who believed in the importance of embracing the modern world and helping others to learn how modern art and modern thinking could change the way we were as a society. His credo was, stimulate a child to explore his own expressive idea once he's been motivated by a theme. The idea is that the art experience should be a problem-solving situation with the end product an individual result. He was completely against cliché art, or art that looked just like the teacher. It was more about the process rather than the product. Instead of having an object that looked like everyone else's or looked like the object in nature, that it was okay to learn the process and create something that was uniquely your own. D'Amico said, "It is my belief that the arts are a humanizing force, and their major function is to vitalize living, to make each child and man richer for having taken part in them. The effectiveness of art is also measured by the way it serves the most urgent need of its time. And our greatest need today, I believe, is to discover the dignity of man, to help him find his self-respect, and to enjoy this greatest natural endowment, the power to create." He began his teaching at Columbia University Teaching College. He began his career in 1925 at the Child Safety Study Association Settlement House Summer Play Schools. What this meant was that he got to work out of 2 suitcases that he dragged with him to 10 different schools in the Manhattan and Bronx area. These suitcases were filled with package lessons, color wheels, perspective charts, canned art lessons that D'Amico felt resulted in canned art projects. He felt that the teaching aids given him were complete failures, so he took children outside and he began to use experiences as their basis for their art education. It was more important for children to observe and think and reason than it was for them to create a drawing of a tree that looked exactly as a tree. In 1926, he was asked to join the Fieldstone School in Riverdale, New York, and there he remained through 1948. This is significant because that experience gave him classroom time where he was able to really work through a lot of the ideas that had developed during his experience with the summer play schools. From 1932 to 1942, he taught in Columbia Teachers College, which allowed him to work directly with art educators and to begin to form a philosophy on how to work with them. He worked with study groups for the Progressive Education Association of the Rockefeller Association, which led to other experiences later on. His belief in progressive education is deeply rooted in his knowledge of John Dewey's philosophies. Dewey believed that experience is the central theme to learning. Dewey championed art's connection to everyday life, and that the idea fed D'Amico's belief that arts education was a creative force that could tackle any curriculum. Dewey's book, Art as Experience, was published in 1934, and that publication, along with the 1928 publication by Anne Shoemaker, The Child Center School, were significant influences to D'Amico. Dewey challenged the aesthetic hierarchies and institutions that isolated art as a curriculum unto itself. He championed the connection of art to everyday life. And that really was a vital force in D'Amico's belief that arts education was connected to every curriculum. The key to both is that experience is central. Modern art, D'Amico believed, was going to be the inspiration to nurture the development of self-expression. In 1935, D'Amico was asked by the Rockefeller Foundation to survey the state of art education in America. He traveled to 23 states, visited 94 schools, and he developed a narrative based on these site visits. He made acute observations of the classroom, and he interviewed teachers about their experiences, instruction, equipment, time, and his basic findings were that art education should be dedicated to the fullest development of the individual, to nurture aesthetic values, to the development of seeing and working like an artist. In other words, to experience process, not just to create a product. To seeing oneself as part of the society, to maintaining self-integrity, and to living life at the fullest level of appreciation. I personally agree with him. I would love to have an artist and a poet live next door to me and have our society support them in that way. D'Amico divided his career into blocks of times. These are divided according to the discoveries and the work that he was enabled to do during these periods of time. His influential years that produced museum programs will be discussed more fully, but his formative years were 1929 through 1940. During this period of time, when he was first entering the field of arts education, he realized that art has a place in all subjects on a creative level. It was the nucleus and means of integrating school life, that art education was here to stay, and that creative teaching should and will become an educational method. That curriculum should be organized in 3 cores: the arts, social, physical sciences, information, and skills. And that arts experiences are for all students, specialized classes to gifted. That greater use and development of leisure time were part of the arts education experience, and that art would be a socializing force. Art is for the handicapped in therapy and can develop wonderful creative settings, and this is something that he put into use at the Museum of Modern Art. And that art was an evaluation of creative expression on the basis of an individual response that measured growth and development, and that could be rated on a fixed standard and no, rather than being rated on a fixed standard and normal groups. The influential years from 1941 to 1963 is when he really defined his ideas and created action programs. It was about the physical act of doing. He created books and articles that really developed and expressed the creative teaching of art. His far-sighted book defined pedagogy for art as a humanizing force. He places the artist as the most valuable member of society. And he developed programs such as the Children's Art Carnival for the Museum of Modern Art. And that actually spread internationally. He was brought into the Museum of Modern Art in about 1937 and remained there until his retirement in 1969. In the challenging years, this was when the post-war years, when after he retired from the Museum of Modern Art in 1969, some of the programs that he started closed. The People's Art Center no longer existed. Museum education began moving away from experimentalism to a focus on the object and what people need to know about it. So it became information over experience. And in today's museum education field, this is still a conversation that has polarized education departments from curatorial departments. In 1957, he believed that that was the ending of progressive education in America. He became disillusioned with the direction of education in general. Some of the programs that he developed while he was actively involved in those wonderful years was a young people's art gallery. This was a place for adolescents to go in an adult museum, in particular the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, that allowed them to make art, to explore and discuss modern art, to make aesthetic judgments, to organize and install exhibitions from work that they created themselves. He worked with the New York High School to offer materials and assist educators in creating enriched arts education environment. And that included visits to the museum where original works of art were part of discussions and focus. He created the Children's Arts Carnival, and that existed from 1942 to 1969, his retirement. It was originally used to introduce parents to the idea of educational programs in a museum, and that included creating a wonderful physical space that was purely for creativity and free play. This spread internationally, and more about that in just a moment, but adults other than the art educators themselves were not allowed inside this space. In fact, the adults were the observers and the art educators were the facilitators. He created a War Veterans Art Center, and eventually that developed into the People's Art Center. And that was an area for returning veterans. It allowed art activities that really gave veterans an opportunity to explore their creative selves, and it was a very important form of therapy for the veterans returning at that period of time. And he also broadcast on NBC a series of episodes experimenting with how to allow parents to teach art in the home through the Enchanted Gates, which you can still find on YouTube. And he created, after his retirement, the Art Barge, the D'Amico Summer Institute. This was an abandoned Navy barge which floated around and had several homes, but wound up in the Hamptons in Long Island. And it became an active center for year-round classes for adults, for artists, and for art educators. One of the things that he did was create a series of books, and he was an active writer about helping teachers understand how to create a lesson for children, where it was a guided, practical, hands-off, but facilitated experience. The teachers should be directors and never dictators. They were encouraged to be interdisciplinary, but always it was based on art making. And he truly believed that art had a viable place in any curriculum. Here's an example of one, my favorite color. And this helped children learn about color, children from a very young age, and what color has to do with identity and discrimination or selection, why certain people choose certain colors. And it was very, very simple. It started off with multicolor construction papers and different objects from a rainbow of colors. And children were directed to choose their favorite color and then create a work of art using colors from that area. And And it was also it helped to instruct teachers what to do if a child chose something not in that color family. And to ask questions, and to find out if the child actually didn't know their colors or if they purposely made a decision to choose something from another family, and to examine why. What was actually happening? What were the subconscious reasons for these choices, and what could be learned? So older students also made additional decisions on what to do with balance and texture and hue, but these were free-form decisions that were discussed after the fact. Finally, I think we should think of Victor D'Amico as the man who really believed in art as a humanizing force. He said, "It is my belief that arts are a humanizing force and that their major function is to vitalize living, to make each child and man the richer for having taken part in them. And I believe that people are more precious than products, and their effectiveness of arts can be measured by the zest that they impart to society. Even though an artist may give his life to art, he gives it on behalf to those who will live to enjoy it. The effectiveness of art is also measured by the way it serves the most urgent needs of its time, and our greatest need today, I believe, is to rediscover the dignity of man, to help him find his self-respect and to enjoy his greatest natural endowment, the power to create." But what is creative teaching in art? Because of D'Amico, we've learned that it demands positive and constructive teaching by an able and skilled teacher. It requires planning and direction with reference to process and procedures. It requires teacher to motivate activity toward a goal, but to stimulate that with a positive response, not with directions. It requires children to have freedom, but not a permissive free-for-all. There should be guidance. It's not an undisciplined environment with no demands or no set limitations. There are parameters and there are systems to help you learn how to reach that inner creativity and be successful. It proposes problems that are within the scope of children's abilities and interests to find solutions, provoke effort, and recognize achievement. A creative teacher in art helps young children develop their artistic sensitivity. It has to do with understanding and enjoying the vast heritage of the past and contemporary art and pushing creativity to a new level. It has to do with helping young people expand their vision beyond their self and realize that there are others with equally unique visions. And it has to do with helping young people be aware of the aesthetic of when and where they live. What is a creative teacher? Someone who has mastery of the creative arts, is trained in understanding and developing creative behavior, and can understand the cultural background of children. A creative teacher has a field of experience and understanding of the creative growth of children at all age levels. They develop and stimulate and sustain creative interests. They can communicate aesthetic values, and they inspire feelings toward art. They do not subscribe to the laissez-faire instruction, but consider stimulating children's imagination and motivate their ideas. They give great importance to the aesthetics of the learning environment and the organization of instruction. And they consider ways of presentation in media just as carefully as they do the outcome. Finally, I'd like to say that Victor D'Amico was a visionary who created an environment for art education to push human culture into a direction that can be transformed into every curriculum. And I personally thank him very much.